Dear fellows, please pay attention. Actually, it's time for beginning our conference. Today, it's a great day actually for the whole Lithuania. For those who came from abroad, we're happy to announce that yesterday, it sounds a little bit funny, but finally, we achieved what we were looking for 100 years. And the Declaration of Independence of Lithuania was found finally. So we are proud for that, and it makes our mood really happy. So today it's a sixth conference of our Humanities Research Center, and as always, this conference is dedicated to history, culture, and language. What means that we try to collect to our conferences every person, our friends, fellows, colleagues from abroad and Lithuanian universities, those who are interested in humanities. And today we will have this plenary session after we have lunch break. University is in downtown of Šiauliai, and you are free to go wherever you want to take a lunch. And after the lunch break, you are welcome to come here. And every one of you, you are going to work in your sessions. And at 6 p.m., we are waiting for you to social party, which will take place in, it's about 500 meters from this place, but for those who are not familiar with Šiauliai, and I think a majority of you are not, so we're asking for you to come, at least if you are not going to spend all the time in your sessions, we're asking for you to come at the end of session time, and all the persons who are responsible for your session will lead you to the place where we'll have a party. In case you have any questions, please do not hesitate and ask for organizers, and we will try to help you and to answer to your questions. And now let me ask to say a welcome speech of Vice Rector of Šiauliai University, Professor Ingrida Šiaulienė.
Labą dieną. Hello to everyone. Welcome speech sounds very nice, but I hope this is only a few words for the start, because there are lots of speeches you will have in the future 2 days of those 2 days. And I'm happy that the most important part for the social activities you have in Chinchin. It's nice also some special place to meet people and to find new ideas for the future. For now, yes, you can see that Lithuanians' faces are more happy today because, as Simonas told, we are really very proud about this new. This is very important news from yesterday. And today conference is like the next step for the discussion, and this is place where can be announced new ideas what to do with this news. Of course, philosophy, humanities, history, it is the basic on what society is developing. And for the region, this part is very important, especially when our region is more engineering region and we have lots of factories, not lots, but factories, we have business societies, business association, but humanities, ideas of humanities is very important to go a bit deep to understand what we are and from where we are and to what, to which way would be great to go to reach our main aims. And I wish you good time, new ideas, to develop these ideas, to have more cooperation in the future, and for Lithuania, for our foreign colleagues, find new Lithuanian words like new, like for example, ačiū. It means like to say. It's easy to remember. Yeah. As well, I would like to say a few words in Lithuanian. Taip pat sveikinu ir tai, kad Lietuvoje mes turime, ir Šiauliuose, ir Lietuvoje turime šitą didelę šventę. Šiandien po vakar informacijos apie rastą dokumentą įrodantį mūsų nepriklausomybę. Ir sveikinu visus susirinkusius į Šiaulių universitetą. Džiaugiuosi, kad jūs atvykstate, dalinatės, būnate ir matote bendradarbiavimo kelius tiek su Lietuvos, tiek su užsienio mokslininkais. Taigi gero jums darbo ir malonių diskusijų.
Dar keletą žodžių taip pat organizacinių, tai yra, pabandysiu labai trumpai tai, ką sakiau prieš tai. Dirbame čia plenarinėme posėdyje iki numatyto pagal programą laiko, tai yra iki 12 valandos ir vėliau turime pietus. Pietus esame miesto centre, taigi laisvas pasirinkimas, bet kuri kavinė ar restoranėlis. Ir po pietų laukiame visų grįžtant į savo sekcijas. 3 sekcijos yra šiame aukšte, visiškai viena greta kitos. Kalbininkai leidžiasi į antrąjį aukštą, 215. 18 valandą kviečiami visi į Čin restoranėlį. Jis yra maždaug 5 minutės kelio, galbūt 7 minutės kelio pėsčiomis. Tie, kurie turi kažkokių planų arba nori tiesiog pasidaryti savo ekskursiją ir galbūt nebus dėl kažkokių kitų priežasčių visą sekcijos darbo laiką, tiesiog ir nežino, kur nueiti, tai labai kviestume tiesiog ateiti į sekcijos pabaigą ir sekcijų vadovai palydės tos žmonės iki vietos. Jeigu kiltų kokių klausimų, tai kviestume kreiptis į sekcijų vadovus ir pabandysime pagelbėti jums. And now I'd like to ask for welcome speech, Director of Šiauliai University Research Institute, Professor Ingrida, Diana Cibulskina.
Thank you. Good morning for everyone. I'm very happy that this conference, 6th conference, international conference, region, language, culture, and history, is organized by the Humanities Research Center of Research Institute of Šiauliai University. And I hope that it will be long time that we will meet each year and you will discuss about these issues, about programs, about possibilities to develop regions in your countries and to change ideas. It is very important for us for the developing of region of different spheres. I wish you all nice days, 2 days, because there will be 2 days here, interesting discussions, and I hope that we will see next year. Gerų įdomių diskusijų, gražios dienos ir iki susitikimo kitais metais. Na, aišku, čia pradedu taip jau kaip ir pabaiga, bet visą laiką tikiuosi, kad tai bus dar daug metų ir ta konferencija bus 10, 20 ir 30. To jums ir linkiu. Sėkmės.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to have you all in this room for the International Conference for Region, History, Culture and Language. I would like to remind that this plenary session is transmitted using Researchers Excellence Network for everybody who are interested in those topics. So everybody online can give some questions for key speakers of this plenary session, and we will try to answer those questions in the very end of presentations. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. Congratulations to everybody for reaching Šiauliai University. And at the same time, we are able to begin our presentations. And first presentation, I would like to ask Senior Researcher Dr. Ieva Ose, from Institute of Latvian History at the University of Latvia, to begin this time of presentations.
Ladies and gentlemen, my topic is on research of material culture from post-medieval period. To illustrate the paper, I have chosen several examples. Artifacts found in course of archaeological excavations at two palaces in the southern part of Latvia. Documentary recordings, inventories of the buildings from the 17th and early 18th century were used for understanding of the previous location of the building, ironwork. It must be emphasized that this paper is an early stage in this study, pointing implicitly in post-medieval research directions which could be worked out in the future. During the 17th and 18th century, in the western part of nowadays Latvia, the Duchy of Kurland and Semigalia existed. The dukes have built several palaces in the outer bailies of the previous medieval castles of the Teutonic Order. Two of them were Bauska and Dobele, not far from the border with Lithuania, as you can see on the map, with red marked with red. Some drawings from the 17th and early 18th century show both palaces. There have been two-story buildings enclosed in high earthen ramparts. Unfortunately, these drawings do not give any details. For example, there are windows, but it isn't clear how did they look like. During the Greek Northern War, in the first decades of the 18th century, Dobele was demolished and Bauska Palace destroyed. Till the 20th century, there were only ruins, so the old building ironwork hasn't survived as its original place. Because of reconstruction of the Duke's Palace in Bauska from 1976 till 1992, there were organized excavations by the archaeologist Andris Caune. At the same time has begun the reconstruction of all three buildings around the inner courtyard and also of their interiors. Nowadays, there are premises of the local museum, which interiors were finished only some years ago. Because of conservation and partly restoration of the ruins in Dobele, since 1987, there were excavations organized by the archaeologist Martin Šrusha. Both excavations in Bauska and Dobele have given a lot of artifacts, among them a plenty of iron construction details, but they were not studied till now. The aim of this paper is to identify the finds and find their previous function. building details were used for bracing the walls and roofs of the wooden and stone buildings and for hanging of windows and doors. They provided greater strength at the same time, relieving the monotony of the flat wall surfaces. Building ironwork included window bars and grills, gate and door fittings and fixtures, especially hinges, hinge pivots, hand grips, locks and keys, and plenty of different nails. For understanding of construction ironwork, it was possible to use written records, inventories of the buildings. Every time when a new administrator of the palace started his work, all buildings were carefully described. The inventories of Bauska Palace have survived from the second part of the 17th century, but there are only two large stocks of the Durbele Palace from 1711 and 1790. They all are kept now in the Latvian National History Archives. What information was given in the inventories? One can see, for example, from the last two lines in original German text and English translation. It can be mentioned that usually all visible ironwork details, especially hinges and hinge pivots, were mentioned. In the description of Bauska Palace in 1711, a large main gate was mentioned. It was studded with broad-headed nails. Both leaves were swirling in 3 pairs of iron strap hinges. Gates with numerous nails protected well when an enemy is attacked, as it was more difficult to hack them compared to a wooden leaf with no forged details, because iron fittings were hard and an axe became blunt but didn't do any damage. Moreover, gates forged with a lot of iron were fireproof, as they didn't catch fire or burned very slowly. The main gate of Bauska Palace was destroyed during the explosion in 1705. In course of archaeological excavation, only the lower part of the masonry was unearthed. There were found some interesting details. First, there was a piece of dolomite stone with carved T-shaped anchor mortise. It was used for corresponding iron hinge pivot found some meters away. The location of the dolomite piece at the left side of the outer gate is mentioned with red in the plan. Parts which attached the iron to the masonry had lead caulking around the iron projections. On such way, the heavy gate leaf could be safely swiveled without threat of falling down. The hinge pivot with T-shaped anchor found in Bauska Palace has survived without a pintle. How did it look like? One can see from similar complete detail found in the excavations of Salt's medieval castle, built in the 13th century, and the reconstruction drawing from Riga stone building of the late 13th century. As the Bauska Palace was built at the end of the 16th century, the hinge pivots refer to that time as well. The large time interval for 3 centuries, namely from the end of the 13th to the end of the 16th century, shows that hinge pivots with T-shaped anchors was a building detail that didn't change its shape for long. It can be mentioned that in the masonry, only a lower part of the pivot was to seen. It was covered with a loop of the strap hinge, so the hinge pivot, this very important construction detail which secured swiveling of the gate leaf, was almost completely invisible. Therefore, only rarely it was mentioned in the written inventories. Iron nails were very widely used in the construction. The list of building material for repairing the roofs of Bauska Palace in 1694 provides evidence. 12,000 nails for lats and 1,000 nails 8 inches long for rafters of one building, and 4,000 nails for lats and 300 nails for the other building were bought. As inch is equal to 2.5 centimeters, the nail has been about 20 centimeters long. In the inventory protocols, there are also mentioned other types of nails, broad-headed pieces used in studying of gate leaves. The drawing made by Johann Christoph Brotze in 1776 on left shows an old leaf which was used in the inner gate of Riga Castle. The massive oak leaf is thick, studded with iron nails, and has 2 hinges, wide iron straps that lie horizontally and are nailed with several broad-headed studs. The leaves could survive for several centuries, so these are likely the gate fittings of Riga Castle from the construction completed in 1515. Similar studded gate leaf has survived in Germany till nowadays, in the medieval Wartburg Castle on the right. In the Bausk and Dobel Palace inventories, lots of iron hinges are mentioned. Usually they were counted in pairs. For example, 4 doors with as many pairs of hinges. It gives an indication that in the 17th and 18th century, every door leaf generally had 2 hinges. In the description of doors, commonly only hinges are mentioned, but these are iron pivots that were fixed in the door jamb. As you have seen before, gate and outer doors were made from solid boards because they had not only to draw a boundary between the outer and inner space, but also to protect inhabitants against enemies breaking in. On the contrary, the inner doors had to be light because their function was only to close the room. Since the Renaissance, they were made light panel doors, where thick battens were used for frame, but thin panels filled the middle part. For panel doors, hinge pivots with spikes were used. The spike was hammered in the wooden door jamb, but outside was left a cylindrical pintle on which a loop of the hinge was hung. A hinge pivot may also be combined from 2 elements. One is a pintle at its upper end and a flattened supporting part at the lower end. The other is spike with a loop that is hung on a pintle. The smith did not make an elongated hinge strap anymore, but the end of it was split in 2 parts and each terminal scrolled so as to form a letter C or S in this picture. To open or fix the door leaf in an indoor area, iron details were necessary. In the second half of the 17th and beginning of the 18th century, door fittings, especially in the cellars and ground floors of Dobel and Bauska Castle, went under the following German names: Anwurf, Überfall, Vorwurf. Only a vague judgment can be made about the correspondence of the above detail to a definite iron fitting. The archaeological artifact from Bauska gives an evidence how one of them could look like. It was a looped hasp that was fitted onto a loop of the staple fixed in the door jamb and fastened with a wooden pintle or padlock. Similar object is shown in the picture made by Dutch painter Peter de Hoch, circa 1660. Several door fixtures were mentioned in German as Drücker in the inventory of Bauska Palace, and another was called under the German name Handgriff. Handgriff, or handle in English, could be an iron bar forged in 2 right angles or made in the form of a half circle, and at both ends nailed to the door leaf. Drücker could be an item which is named thumb-latched handle in English. Such details were found at Dobel Palace. They were similar to the thumb-latched handles which are documented in Latvian peasant buildings up to the early 20th century. That only a certain group of people could open the door from the outside. Metal locks and keys were used, sometimes fixed door locks. In German, Durchschließenschloss or padlock, Vorhängeschloss, are mentioned in the inventory protocols. But probably the first was a mounted lock for operating either from inside or outside of the room. In Durbel and Bauska Palace, no one of such locks were found, but there are rotary keys and lock execution plates, which were necessary for such locks. But some padlocks were found, and they are for other function. They were put only on the one side of the door leaf. Window fittings is ironwork hammered into the wooden jamb or frame, hinges and hinge pivots, glazing bars, corner braces and fixtures. A window frame fixing is described in greater detail in the inventory protocol of the second half of the 17th century. And two types of window leaves were used. The eldest one consisted of multiple lead cames fixed with iron glazing bars. Of course, during archaeological excavations, only these glazing bars were found. As lead is a soft material, it is prone to sagging and panes could fall out. To avoid it, horizontally, vertically or crosswise, several thin iron bars or glazing bars were hammered to the frames. The bars were encircled by several lead rings that were fixed to lead cames. Such construction of the window you can see in the painting The Ill-Matched Couple by Lucas de Cranach the Elder. The same protocol mentions an innovation, wooden window jambs with larger panes. The description is of different rooms, allows concluding that one opening could have 3, 4, 6 or even 8 parts. This may be exemplified by the following description. 8 panes, no lead, placed in a wooden frame. Out of these, 4 with 4 pairs of hinges and 4 stays. It may be assumed that the 4 upper panes were unmovable, but the 4 lower parts in 2 leaves that could be operated as hinges and fittings are recorded. A similar window reconstruction from the 18th century is shown in the drawing. As in the Bauska Palace, several window fittings, angle hinges, and corner braces were found. It is to consider that in the last period of the construction, there have been similar window leaves. So, and at the end, some conclusions. It is to be underlined that during the last centuries of the existence of Bauska and Durbel palaces, they were not luxurious premises, and therefore the found fittings are also simple. The artifacts mentioned in this paper represent samples of the common building ironwork. It is only a small part of the iron objects which were mentioned in the inventories of these buildings. Probably after the demolition of the palaces, a part of them, of our old ironwork, was gathered and used repeatedly in new buildings or utilized by local blacksmiths as a waste material. But nowadays, these artifacts from both palaces are valuable material for further research of archaeologists and cultural historians. As up to now, little attention was paid to research of post-medieval building ironwork in Latvia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As we have agreed that the questions and discussion will be after the final presentation, so please think about the questions and you will have a possibility to ask presenters. And now I would like to ask and invite for presentation our colleague from Latvia, Zane Šilina.
Labdien, labdien. Thank you for the very kind inviting, and I'm happy to be here in such a sunny day after such a important happenings. Congratulations. My presentation will focus on some pieces of literature, concretely some dramatic works, which I consider quite interesting because they show some very important aspects of development of the place, the self-consciousness of the nation, in this case the Latvians. The second half of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century was a crucial period in the development of the Latvian nation and its culture. It was a period when not only the issue of the Latvian self-identity became topical, but also a discussion about the part the Latvians as a nation were to play within a broader European context began. The turn of the century saw the emergence of several issues that had not been topical before. For example, the relationship between the individual and society, the spiritual evolution of the individual and society, the potential role of individual and in the future course of the world. The person who paid special attention to these issues was Rainis, considered to be one of the greatest Latvian poets and playwrights of all the times. Rainis always strived to follow the topical artistic trends while developing a distinctive individual style. Therefore, his writing demonstrates quite specific attempts to combine what is traditional and what is beyond traditions, or, in other words, to make synthesis of the specifically national and the universal, or even the cosmopolitan. The concept of space and its development in Rainis' plays provides the most interesting subject of analysis in this respect. In this presentation, I will focus on the basic principles of forming space in Rainis', one of the most famous play, Fire and Night, Uguns un Nakts, and so-called creative thoughts or drafts. For the unfinished plays, God and Devil, Dievs un Vēls, and Īliņš or Kurbats, those both names of the play because Rainis could not choose the concrete name for his main hero for some time, and he uses both variants. In these dramatic works, space does not function as a passive background of the action, but can rather be characterized as peculiar code, which helps to reveal the main features of Rainis' creative quest. The creative thoughts for Rainis' unfinished plays are a very specific literary material. Although these plays were never written, the material fixed in the author's notes supply ideas for a number of other dramatic works, as well as specify the development of Rainis' creative and philosophical thought in general. The creative thoughts for the play God and Devil were put down roughly in the period from 1910 to 1918 and were inspired by different sources. The main impulses come from the collection compiled by the folklorist and writer Ants Lērkis Puškaitis. His folk tales and the Latvian folk tales and fairy tales, where a large chapter of tales about God and Devil is included. In addition of this, the creative thoughts and shapes for the play reflect the impact of such classical texts as the Bible, the Vedic poems as well, and we could continue. When shaping the notes for the play, Rainis mainly was interested in the relations of binary oppositions as the basis of the creation and the further evolution of the world. Therefore, definition of these plans has been influenced by the cosmogonic conception of Latvian folklore that often connect this process to the joint actions of God and devil as divine twins. It is devil who performs the first part of creation. That is, he separates earth from formless water or chaos and brings it upwards from the deep as a nucleus. Only after that, God gives the earth its form. In the creative thoughts for the play, Rainis connects devil to the earth and its internals instead of waters of chaos. However, it must be noted that the poet uses the motif of gods and devils' concurrency, being so popular in Latvian folklore, thus including in the scope of play his characteristic conception of the clash of opposites as a prerequisite for eternal change and evolution. In this case, Rainis follows the conception we can find in the Latvian folklore, where devil is not only the older, but at least primordially also stronger than God. You can see, you cannot see. I will give some example. Devil is the oldest one, lives into the ground. It's warmer there. God is driven up upon the earth's ground where it is so cold. Therefore, God forms the heaven for himself. Then devil comes, quarrel. Devil drives his cows on the earth. Somebody has fruits upon the earth's ground, somebody has them beneath. It is remarkable that the devil has been given the functions of the original creator and trickster, but God acts as the recreator in the raw material of the play. Devil, in Rainis' interpretations, is linked to the self-creative force of the uncontrolled primary fire. God uses the fire as well. Nevertheless, his fire has lost his connection with primordiality. The fire of God is subjected, rationalized force, which is forced to work by means of intellect, not by intuition anymore. Some quote, devil has the fire of sun and the primordial fire of the earth. Heat-waved, smoky, for good smaller, but whiter, latest fire. Devil makes the hairy cattle of the soil. God creates humans without hair, or we should say fur, because to translate Rainis is not an easy task, as you will see, unfortunately, in some next slides. This way, the poet comes indirectly to an important question: which of the forms of creation, the original or the recreation, has to be considered the most essential? The raw material for the play give an impression that Rainis intended to depict the joint actions of creator and recreator, that is, of God and devil. For example, human made of devil's clay, God gives his breath for him. Pointing out this, Rainis focuses on the idea of evolution and the eternal recreation as well. Cause of devil are the original ideas stolen by God. God made them alive, recreating them as a poet does. So, Rainis emphasizes that neither God nor devil undergoes internal development. Therefore, the goals of their action as well as their capability are limited. Thus, God and devil in the scope of his play have been outlined as static characters, separate steps in the world structure. And the orderly fashion of the world is created dictates the beginning of its restricted nature. According to Rainis' conception, only human has wider possibilities of evolution. Therefore, the poet interprets the relations between God and devil as dialectic that has been transformed outside of human and forms a prologue for the work of reformation of self and the world that the new future man is tasked with. Rainis notes, the genius always finds something new Nevertheless, it becomes a cliché in the course of time, holds back the fresh winds. God suppresses a human, a father suppresses a son. Eels, it means eelinch, drives God away from the ground of the earth. God, in his senility, driven off on the roof, it means to the heaven, sits alone again. And now about this further human tasks. While the play God and Devil fixes the shape of the limited world, the creative thoughts for the play Eelinch tend to transgress the traditional boundaries. The creative thoughts for the play Eelinch consist of the textual fragments of the play in different stages on completion, as well as the outlines of various ideas that are often incompatible and yet provide valuable evidence of the development of Ryan's thoughts and the genesis of his characters. The creative thoughts for Eelinch were put down roughly in the period from 1900 to 1926, and although the play was never written, this material supplied ideas for a number of other dramatic works, including the play Uguns un nakts, or Fire and Night. Shaping Eelinch and later the main hero, Bates Bearslayer, in his play Fire and Night, Ryan drew inspiration for his involving ideas not only from the Latvian folk tales, but mostly for Andrejs Pumpur's epic poem Large Places. You can see some notes about it on the slide. So the protagonist of the Pumpur's epic poem is the strongman nursed by a mother bear. And for this reason, perhaps he has a bear heirs. Bearslayer undergoes the series of tests. He fights with a bear, saving his foster father, the chieftain of Lielvārde, encounters various dark forces and defends his homeland against the German crusaders. Bearslayer perishes in a single combat with the Dark Knight. Despite the death of the hero, the epic poem ends on an optimistic note. The time will come when Bearslayer triumphs over his enemy and the people regain their lost freedom. In 1889, explaining the idea of the epic poem Bearslayer in the newspaper Baltijas Vēstnesis or the Baltic Herald, Pumpurs himself characterized his hero as the embodiment of the Latvian nation and its collective experience. You can see the quote, Bearslayer with bear's heirs is at the same time the Latvian nation itself. It is half wild yet strong. It is free and independent as long as the witch sun, by the way, it's the Dark Knight, culture does not cut off the bear's heirs. Having lost the bear's heirs or being introduced to culture, the nation loses its freedom and independence. While working on the drafts for the play Eelinch, Ryan set himself a goal to create a new type of the hero who, unlike Bearslayer created by Pumpurs, would epitomize spiritual, not merely physical strength. Therefore, the hero of the creative thoughts for the play Eelinch could be interpreted both as a representative of the traditional national values and the harbinger of the future, whose task is not only to fight against an usually strong outer foe, but also to undergo a very complex process of spiritual growth. If the main function of Bearslayer in Pumpur's epic poem are to uphold the traditional values and to strengthen the boundaries of the nation as a community, also its geographic boundaries, Ryan's hero transgresses the traditional boundaries. It should be mentioned that while planning the creation of his new hero, Ryan paid special attention to the motive of the quest. He was especially interested in Canto 4 of Pumpur's epic poem, where the hero, Bearslayer, on a quest to search for his kidnapped bride, Laimdota, is going for a long journey. Judging by the notes, Rhymes considered sending his hero on a similar quest. Similar scenes we can find in different epic traditions in Europe, but I will see just a quote and the scheme, because what is very important for me, the Bearslayer in Pumpur's epic poem, in his way of searching Laimdota, reaches the place where the earth and the sky meet. Respectively, he reaches the rim of the earth. Here is the quote of Pumpur's in Latvian and in English. He reaches the end of the world. Afterward, the Bearslayer and his fellow travelers sail in the dark sea, reach the Diamond Mountain, find that there is no way farther to be led in the darkness of the endless sea, and therefore go round the Diamond Mountain and return home. It means that Pumpur's epic poem suggests such a spatial model which comprises strict limits to the world, thus underscoring the limited nature of space in general. Because the rim of the earth has been marked twofold, not only by the place where sky and ground both merge, but also by the location of Diamond Mountain as well. Rhymes, in his turn, reflecting on the above-mentioned quest of the hero in Pumpur's Bearslayer and putting down his own original idea for the play Elinch, notes something absolutely different. And here you see the quote. Sailing along the rim of the earth, there is no sky to be seen, only the endless sea and darkness. The peak of the Diamond Mountain seen from afar, but it's forbidden to climb it. Then the sky and the daylight again, antipodes. A beautiful island that draws to itself and doesn't let go, or the Isle of the Death. Elinch sails to the antipodes, reaches the North Pole, at the other side of the Earth, the underside, and sees that there are no antipodes, no sacred island, the Earth is round, and nobody falls off it on the other side. We see that Rhymes' reading of the Pumpur's epic poem is quite creative. Furthermore, Rhymes intended to depict his hero not only as the discoverer of the world model that corresponds to the findings of modern science, but also wishes to expand the space available to the hero. A world that has spherical form precludes the existence of the rim of the earth and opens almost unlimited scope for movement. Consequently, the hero's physical quest might symbolize also the unlimited scope of the inner growth. The third, Fire and Night, or Uguns un Nakts. Looking in the watch, I understand that I have somehow be more concentrated as before. I will try to just give some notes for the main ideas of Rhymes and show you some examples, of course, trying to explain more than reading my ideas, my conception in details. What is important for the play Fire and Night? In this play, Rhymes provide the further stage of shifting the traditional boundaries. I should remind that the play was originally intended as an opera libretto, and therefore Rhymes paid a lot of attention to the stage conception, to lights, to colors and so on, and therefore, of course, there are a lot of fantastic scenes. The first of all, the play demonstrates authors' attempts to emphasize the diversity and variability of the space. You see some examples. I wouldn't quote because of limited time, he combines different spheres, earth, water, and air. He chooses the different environment for each of the 5 acts. He tries to emphasize the eclectic space. You see this combination of old Latvian, barbarian, and something of European culture, and great motifs of great fantasy, as well as Rainis written. So they're very important for him in this diversity of play. But I would like to pay the attention to the Act 4, where, like in the Canto 4 of Pumpur's Large Places of Bear Slayer, the Rainis Bear Slayer is going to in search for his bride Laimdot as well, and there is text. I didn't find the translation in Lithuanian. I'm afraid that maybe some fragments untranslated, and maybe, and therefore I had a real difficulty. The Rainis texts are very nuanced and very complex. They are not very easy to translate at all, and therefore I can show you 2 variants in English and in Russian. Neither of them shows the essence of Rainis texts. Therefore, I just can ask you to trust me that in the text is the motifs, the words that I'm trying to say to you. But in any case, I will try this text to read in Latvian for you to hear the sound. This is Spīdols text. Spīdola is one of the most important character in the play, some kind of witch, but at the same time, she represents the spirit, the arts. It's difficult to say very concrete what this is. This Spīdols text, he says it to Large Place. Nu mans tu esi, tu zemes stiprākais, kāds spēks caur pasaulēm skaistuma nesi, caur tumsas tumsumiem, caur krēslas dziļumiem, mēs dimanta kalnu atšķelsim, kas pats savā gaismā visizstālim, kas sava saule pats sevi silda, krūtis ar bezgala laimību pilda. And then, afterwards, vēl tas nav viss, tas ceļš vēl īs, aiz zemes malas, aiz debesis malas, vēl plešas jūra, kur nav ne salas, ne viļņu, ne vētras, ne dienas, ne nakts, kur beidzas viss un stāv briesmas uz vakts. The path outlined in Spīdols text leads from the darkness to light, but the end of the textual fragment heralds the return of all elements to latent state. The realm of primal chaos thus excludes the existence of any separate category, not only that of physical objects, but also elements. According to mythological beliefs of different nations, the primal chaos includes potentials of creation of a new world and is perceived as the end and the beginnings of all things. The Spīdols text also possibly provides evidence that the environment of chaos awaits the moment of new world's creation. Rainis has tried to make the space depicted in the play Fire and Night an amphibious and very volatile one, but contrary to Pumpur's, unlimited. One can even say that Rainis has tried to enlarge the space to infinity, and one of the most significant tendencies is the poet's wish to connect the theory of infinity to possibility of endless creation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for a very nice presentation. I hope that there will be somebody with additional questions during the discussion time. And now we have the possibility to invite a nice delegation from University of Zagreb in Croatia. And we would like to invite Professor Vladimir Legac. to read the presentation, and at the same time you are everybody invited to think about questions possible for this nice delegation.
Good morning. Do all of you hear me well? Okay. So as you can see, this is a joint presentation by three authors. Okay. The first author is Draženko Tomic. Okay. Yes. That's this gentleman in the second row. Can you please stand up? Okay, and wave. And the third author is Blaženka Filipan Žignic. Okay. And I'm this second guy here, Vladimir Legac. Thank you, Simonas. Thank you, Vita. Okay. We, as you've heard, we come from the University of Zagreb, Faculty of Teacher Education. But our topic deals with Bosnia and Herzegovina, a neighboring country. Okay. Croats are also a constituent nation there. So Štefa Jukic was a Central European writer. Her literary works deal with a wide range of topics and value aspects, but it is always done with humorous, feminine, and idealistic touches. The research study of us that we are going to present today will focus on two of her mystical novels. We don't have enough time, so we'll concentrate primarily on Petna Stornjeva, that's the Croatian title. English translation would be 15 Towers. But why we are presenting this novel has been translated into Czech, okay, and it probably influenced the audience there. The expected results are some kind of a delineation of a self-Slavic identity and awareness that developed and that were shaped in Bosnia and Herzegovina mentality, and that were all finally forwarded and mediated to Czech readers by means of these two novels. The second, I'm sorry, novel is Plášť Malog Križára, the Small Crusader's Gown would be the English translation. Here you can see the inscribed copy of Petna Stornjeva. Now, short biography of Štefa Jukic. She was born on St. Stephen's Day in 1895 in Sazin, okay, which was part of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. Her father was Emanuel Fiarak. He worked as a judge, you know, in Austrian-Hungarian Empire. People moved, okay. So he married a Croatian, Olga Mihicic from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and they moved, Štefa Jukic went from place to place in Bosnia and Herzegovina as her father had to change courts. So she attended primary school in Bijeljina, that would be nowadays Republika Srpska, belonging to the Serbian part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the higher girls' school in the capital of Bosnia, in Sarajevo. She worked as a teacher of French. She studied French and German at the University of Graz in southern part of Austria. She took a longer trip to Italy, and this was reflected in her later literary creation, okay, but she never went to France, but you'll see that she's talking about the Provence, okay. So in 1913 she met a painter, Gabriel Jukic, in Sarajevo. They married in 1970, and this painter illustrated all these pictures that you'll see from her novels. They moved into 1955, so that's already the third state that they lived in fact the fourth, okay, to Livno, that would be the Croatian part of today's Bosnia and Herzegovina, and between 1955 and her death, they lived far away from the public eye. She died on the 28th of November 1971, and the 29th of November was the national holiday in the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, the founding date of the second Yugoslavia. And I want to use this opportunity to tell how happy we are that we are here on this day when you are celebrating your 100th anniversary of your independence document. Okay, that's her portrait, okay. Now, so something general about her literary work. She's known as a writer of prose literary works that are imbued with the warmth of a woman's heart, genuine lyricism, but also with the aristocracy of spirit. Her literary debut was Jairová kći, Jair's daughter. All of you are familiar with the biblical text. It was published in the journal. Its title was Croatian Teaching Profession. And already in this very first work, she already appeared as a well-built literary writer in terms of content, concepts, and writing techniques. She cooperated with 32 different types of press, okay, and her bibliography contains at least 156 units, and 7 of them are books, okay, long time. Here you can see her books. So now let me tell you something about 15 Towers, the first novel. It was translated into Czech by František Karas. Czech title is Petnáct věží. I don't speak Czech, so I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. It takes place in the 14th century in the medieval Bosnia. That's the time of the Croatian King Stjepan Karamanich and France. Both these countries are connected on one side by the monks and on the other by the heretics. They were Albigensians and Bosnian Christians. There are hints about Karamanich confluence with Dubrovnik. That was an independent state. My family on my father's side comes from there. I lived there for 4 years. Okay, I hope. Then the novel deals with the conflicts with, the time that it is about, with the conflicts in Elipici, Stefan Uroš IV, a very important Serbian king. That's the time of the fights between Dominicans and Franciscans for supremacy in the missionary work of Bosnia. Okay, so those two orders. Now the plot of 15 Towers. A Bosnian hermit Inoslav is traveling to France to report the death of the Bosnian missionary Philip to his mother. It was the time of ongoing religious unrest there. He settles down in the vicinity of the Dominican monastery of Our Lady of 15 Towers. A Jew, Izahar, hides his 8-year-old daughter Elizabeth into the monastery. She spent there 9 years, and then her father comes and wants to marry her, a prearranged marriage. The girl goes with the father on a farewell trip to Bosnia, where she decides to become a Christian. She decides to go back to the monastery and to take care of the sisters suffering from the smallpox. Now, the second novel, I'm sorry, we won't have time to concentrate on that one. It was also translated into Czech. Now, it's important to notice the settings of the novel. So, it's set into the southern France. Here you can see the places, okay? And here we spelled them in Croatian, today's Croatian, which uses the French, but Stefan Jokic used phonetic writing, okay? That's the case with Serbian and Bosnian, okay, but not Croatian, okay? Czech readers of the novel could enjoy the beautiful descriptions of various regions offered by Jurkic. There were descriptions of alleged regions in Provence. As I've said, we don't know whether she has ever been there. We know she went to Italy. as well as those in Bosnia and in Dubrovnik. The quantitative representation in the novel follows exactly that order. In text dealing with Provence, its first representations are related to buildings, and in the second place the nature, whereas Bosnian settings are vice versa. First region and then the buildings, and of the text dealing with Dubrovnik only mentioned buildings. Stefania's descriptions of nature are vivacious. The story follows seasonal changes. For example, the persecution of Jews and lepers stopped with the start of the first autumn rains, and it is again followed by the summer time without rain. Stefania specifically describes a human home that is ready for a celebration. So all these religions that played an influence and that realized that sort of mentality. So she describes a Jewish home on the eve of the Sabbath, so nice and neat dining rooms with the smell of exquisite dishes. From Christians, she describes Christmas, selected dishes, the mood of the celebrations, and the rest of it. The most detailed descriptions are of the monastery of Our Lady of 15 Towers. Well, it's a square building of hewn stone with moat, 2 entrances, and a large courtyard with 2 churches, a line of trees, leads. Okay, I'm not going to give you all the details, but she's a master of presentation of details, you know, and readers can enjoy in it. Now, what we want to concentrate on, the Bosnian-Herzegovina mentality. It is especially evident at the descriptions of the big fair in the town of Visoko, that's south of Sarajevo, today's capital. Jurkic describes the joy and the colorfulness of the people coming from nearby and distant towns, crowded inns and pubs, and all the talks there. And there can be seen various smugglers and middlemen, pimps, those who were selling silver, money changers, foreign dealers, okay, money. So people selling silver, they were people from Dubrovnik, okay. And, you know, they all come together to this central Bosnian town, and they influence the self-awareness of them. One of the illustrations by Stefania's husband. Now, it mentions religious intolerance in Bosnia. Earlier I mentioned heretics. They are numerous and they are supported by some nobles. Therefore, Inosov says, this quotation, it seems to me that these people of mine will have to suffer for a longer time until they are finally relieved, until they are able to instill the crosses at all the intersections. And nowadays, if you are familiar with the situation, problems are there. The situation in Bosnia is somewhat stabilized around 1330. There were no more attacks on Dubrovnik merchants, but it looks that preparations for a war against Croatian princes were underway. Inosov is telling that Bogdan Godošević's people have been with the viceroy for 4 days, and here a quotation, they've been arranging something. It's been going on for 4 days, as if it were too peaceful for them, yet they would like to stir up some new troubles so that the people will end up in bloodshed because of their greed and ambitions. And once again, they will start something against Croatian princes. Yes, they're afraid of that. They're afraid that someone could free us from these wolves that have done all this. And the history might repeat even nowadays in the 21st century after all those things that happened in the mid-1990s. Now, this self-awareness can be seen through major roles. So, characters in the novel. Jurkic introduces many characters into the plot. The main character is a Jewish Elizabeth. Then Izahar, her father and hermit inner sub. All of the characters are outlined emphatic. Stefania unavoidably describes the external appearance of almost all her characters, even those who are barely mentioned, and she could have skipped some of those descriptions as unnecessary for minor roles. No, that will be enough. Now something about religion. Readers in the Czech Republic have certainly experienced Stefania Jurkic as a very religious person that transfuses her own religiosity into the characters of the novel. She mediates to her readers, both to the Croatian ones as well as to the Czech ones, a distinct affinity for the monks, especially the followers of Saint Dominic. According to Jurkic's descriptions, those holy souls do not carry any bitterness. They do some work, they pray for all. The obsession with monasteries is evident in the very detailed descriptions of the appearance and structure of the monastery 15 towers, the inexhaustible repertoire of various monastic faces, duties, and habits. Down to the smallest detail, she is intimately familiar with the agenda of each of the nuns and even with their private prayers in any time of day or night, okay, and she gives priority to Dominicans. It seems that in her delineations of these almost saintly figures, Mrs. Jurkic is largely leaving aside all human features and that she has completely idealized their way of life. This might be the reason why her descriptions of the alleged animosity between the Franciscan Dominicans and the struggle for supremacy in the missionary work of Bosnia, she justifies the very hostility itself as a result of irrational zeal for the salvation of souls. Then she talks about persecution of the Jews in the 14th century in France. So the descriptions of these events, we don't know whether they happened or not. This is not a historical novel, it's important to emphasize, have been described rather clumsily, so she was not good at it. Persecutions were initiated with an explanation that the Jews and lepers had joined together and poisoned wells and drinking water, and that they had associated with the Muslims from Grenada and Tunisia so that they could destroy Christians. Nowadays, when we look at the history through the 20th century, there were all sorts of associations and blocks, okay? Nowadays, probably between Americans, Germans, and Russians, so yes. Now, Jurkic tries to look at these persecutions from the Jewish perspective. So she's trying to cross to the other side and grasp the thinking from the perspective of persecuted Jews. Thus, Isahar, a chaste and quiet man, while wishing to save his daughter and property, was very surprised when he realized that he would hide his daughter in a convent. Stefania speaks of the Jews' deep distress of baptized souls and adds that the Jews are a people sensitive to their faith and consistent in its preservation. Now, our concluding remarks. So, Jurkic's novels are more feuilletons than historical, outlining a specific mentality derived from the South Slavic identity and self-awareness. Here, specifically, it was a mixture of fantasy and reality, past and present, religious and secular. Uncritical assumption of Jurkic's interpretations of the past can lead readers to wrong conclusions. With style and approach to history, Stefania's novels are similar to those that were written by another great Croatian writer and Jurkic's contemporary, Marija Jugić-Zagorka. A reader in the Czech Republic can enjoy the descriptions of very beautiful nature. Such a reader could for sure wish to visit not only Bosnia, the land of beautiful forests and valleys, but also the beautiful landscapes in the Provence in France. These descriptions in her works of art can convey to readers deep Bosnian forests and high isolated mountains, a nice green landscape, ripe wheat, the Bosna River, etc. At the same time, the quality of living space does not necessarily affect the moral character profile. The brightest characters live mostly in poor conditions. The Bosnian Herzegovina mentality that is mediated to the readers in the Czech Republic for the main characters of the novel is very positive. They're usually proud, moral, very empathetic, and with no distinction, they are convinced that their lives have a deeper meaning as well as that they are part of a larger plan. This empathy is particularly evident in relation to the sick and abandoned children. Stefania Rukic mediates to us a picture by means of which we can recognize the appearance of a good man, and it is done primarily through the description of the face and eyes. In her vision, moral visions have bright, noble eyes. The mentality of the Bosnian Herzegovina people is especially evident at the big fair in the town of Visoko. And as for the attitude towards the religions, the reader can notice a certain dose of intolerance towards heretics and deep understanding of the Jews. The religious tolerance towards the heretics is at a very low level, whereas towards the Jews is extremely high. As for the political life, it is mentioned only very little, but the situation in Bosnia is always tense during the plot, and it's been so all the time. I mean, in reality, it is suggested that political leaders tend to conspiracies and wars, now with this and now with that neighbor, as well as that nobles are intriguing with heretics and forging various conspiracies, selling common resources to foreign traders for silver and gold. In addition to the bad side of the Bosnian mentality, which is illustrated through the example of the nobles, Jurkic mentions some others who are prone to quarrels, corruptible, who do not keep to their traditions, who put money in the first place, and who are gullible. Oču, is that correct? Yes, thank you very much. In Croatian and in Bosnian, it's hvala, okay? And Provence, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. According to program, it's time for my presentation. I'm Simonas, head of the Humanities Research Center, and a person who is representing the history on this plenary session. The topic of partisan resistance against Soviet occupation in 1944-1953 is well known in Lithuania. However, probably I was thinking that for foreign colleagues, maybe it will be something new. And lucky for me, when CIA declassified those documents and reports, I was thinking to use for my presentation and to show how CIA saw the situation in Lithuania. Because here we know what was happening, but it was very interesting for me to see and to present for you also how Americans were seeing those fights and clashes against Soviets, and probably more important, not only the fights, but also the Lithuanian society's attitude to Soviet occupation. So I've used 37 reports. The documentation, as I said, was 1946-1953. And I classified all the reports, actually not reports, but information within the reports in two main groups. I mean, the clashes between partisans and the Soviets. And the second group is Lithuanians' attitude. Lithuanians, by Lithuanians, I mean not only the nationality, but society more. So the attitude towards the Soviet regime. As you have seen, all the slides are some kind of pictures which were made by partisans liaisons. So the information I'm going to present were delivered by dates, I mean chronologically, and 1946, 1947. So NCIA was writing that the summer, in the summer 1946, the partisan group in Lithuania succeeded to establish the highest headquarters group, which is not exactly what was happening, but some similar situation was. They were saying that Lithuanian partisans have 3 subdivisions: military operations, supply, and intelligence. Some words about what Soviets were doing. I mean, MVD and MGB troops in Lithuania is the main purpose is the liquidation of the partisan. And what was interesting for me that there was a mentioned the information that the Soviets were dressing some their agents in American, the British or Swedish uniforms and sending them within to infiltrate into partisan groups. We knew that fact from the later period, I mean 1949, 1948. So CIA knew that situation in 1946. There is also information that the partisans had good relationship with the rural area. There were some information about the numbers. They are not really true. I mean, far from reality. Americans were saying that, actually CIA was saying that they have information about possibility to arrange as much as 101,000 men. However, they also were saying that the real power, the real force is 6,200 men in arms, and that there is a possibility to gather almost 75,000. But of course, not every of those thousands is able to have enough ammunition. Of course, the present of movements, that's how sometimes partisan war was called, movement. So the partisan activity is directed to not against Soviet army, but against Lithuanian communists. That's also sounds interesting for at least Lithuanian society. Also, what was interesting that according to CIA or the vision of CIA, the Soviets were controlling the main cities, and there is a number of the cities. However, the rural part, I mean the villages, were dominant by anti-Soviet partisans. And also the numbers already are different. They are talking about or writing actually, 20,000 guerrillas. And the collectivization was also one of the main reasons for resistance, not only the occupation, but the collectivization process. There were also some news that the farmers, especially those which were sent by Soviets from deep within territories of Soviet Union to Lithuania to probably as colonizers, they were sometimes even killed by partisans. So how CIA have seen or saw the Lithuanian partisans? So according to the vision, 70% of partisans were Lithuanian nationality, 12% were Germans, and among them about 500 former officers of Wehrmacht and SS. And also there were 12% of Russian nationality, most of them Vlasov's, General Vlasov's units, or at least those who were fighting among the Vlasov units. The head committee and was formed in to fight against the Soviets, and the Lithuanian partisans were publishing some newspapers. And what was interesting for me, the CIA knew about those newspapers, and they knew very well about the content of those newspapers and what was written in those newspapers. And according to CIA, those partisan newspapers were the only real information about the life in Sovietized Lithuania. And there's also, we see that the year is 1951, 1953, what means that the clashes are almost for 7-8 years. And of course, there are some changes in Lithuanian society. And we see that discovery of partisans is usually made through informers. That's the problem, and CIA also knew about that. They were saying that the истребители, those pro-Soviet fighters, were getting the reward, 300 rubles, for those partisans, if they were able to catch a partisan. There were plenty of discussions in Lithuania, and there's another proof that Lithuanian partisans usually were wearing Lithuanian army's uniforms. That's why actually they were combatants. And now the second part of my presentation is Lithuanians' attitude towards Soviet regime. As I said, Lithuanians, I mean the Lithuanian society. So almost all the reports were full of the information that Lithuanian society hated Soviet regime, and as we may see from that, from the lines, that the hatred of Baltic population against the Soviet is intense. In the Baltic area, a war atmosphere definitely exists. Actually, all those reports and the information within the reports show that the Americans were really checking the possibility, or let's say opportunity, what if there will be some clashes between West and East, what will be the main movements, the attitude of local inhabitants. And the war actually, or possibility of war, is dominating in the reports. The partisan activity in Lithuania is confined to a small independent groups. That's from the period of late period of partisan fights, but again the relation with the population is generally good. Also, the CI was writing that on the 16th of November, that's the same day as I was talking about the Declaration Act. The signs of passive resistance, and during the 16th of February, what is the Lithuanian Independence Day, it is usual to see illegal national posters in the cities. Also, there were mentioned some students which are active, at least at that period, active anti-Soviet resistance, but unfortunately they are not organized, and there were some reports that some students were arrested because of anti-Soviet activity. The usual type of partisans, according to CIA, is limited, and mostly it's the attacks against the persons who are well known for collaborating with the communists. Despite the risks of aiding the partisans, again, relation between partisans and the civil population are good. The morale of people in Lithuania, according to CIA, remains high. Hatred of Russians, or to be more exact, of the Bolsheviks and everything that is communist, is intense. And there were also, as I've noticed, plenty of information about the possibility of war. All the people's hope for is the war. For me personally, it was a very new discovery. Today in Lithuania, we are talking about the suicides and the problem of suicides, but the document was dated 1947, and the CIA was writing that it is remarkably that there are not many suicides among Lithuanians. And the reason was, according to CIA, that because of such tremendous actually disastrous time, the life of a human is so precious, so that not so many suicides. Yeah, also the Bolshevism, according to main opinion, must perish, and again the war, everyone is certain that the war must come. So again, the war, sometimes it seems that all the main activity of CIA information was to collect all the variations and possibility about the possibility of war and what Lithuanian society's attitude towards the war will be. So, should the war break out, there is a little doubt that at least 1/3 of Lithuania would go to forest. So, CIA was thinking that about 1/3 of Lithuanian society will take part in active resistance against Soviets. It's about 1948, 1949. If war should break out now, many innocent people would suffer. The CIA was thinking that there will be a lot of revenge acts, and they were even suggesting in those reports that probably it's useful to provide some information that not everyone, young person, those who joined Komsomol is really bad. Maybe there is some chances to get them back and something like that. But anyway, the mood of society for CI seemed that actually society is full of anger, and if the war will break, plenty of people will suffer. Yeah, the certainty of the part of Lithuanians that conflict between the East and West will be solved. Their problems is strengthening with every years, and of course, it keeps patriotic and anti-Soviet feelings. To Lithuanians, war means liberation and freedom. Again, those who are familiar with the Bolshevik system, probably they have heard about the young boy, which was famous, Pavlik Morozov. Well, he became famous because he told about his parents to NKVD, and the parents were arrested, and he became some kind of a hero. So for CIA, the information was that spying by children among their parents and denouncing them to the authorities is not known in Lithuania. So the family remains the stronghold. The constant sense of fear and insecurity caused by the Soviet regime has a deterring effect on the number of persons joining the Communist Party. There was also some growing number especially in late 40s, at the beginning of 50s, that the number of Communist Party was growing. Again, so quasi-sponsoring of national identification, national culture, national education, the museums, sing festivals and something like that by CIA was seen that it's a clear pro-Sovietic movement, has nothing in common with the real Lithuanian nationality. And the final lines that a few Lithuanian girls have married Soviets, however, Lithuanian men never marry Soviets. So it's some kind of I suppose some kind of a fiction, but however, that was the information was in the on CIA report. And my conclusions. That CIA had permanent connection with Lithuania, and information provided in reports shows interest in Lithuanians' attitude toward Soviets. The data provided about Lithuanian partisans had deep connection with the analysis of possible military actions between the West and Soviet Union. This condition was also a main factor introducing the morale of civilians in Lithuania. Despite that partisans outnumbered Soviet forces, they were described as a strong military force within a region. And in the reports, I was feeling that according to CIA opinion, the Lithuania was clearly divided into rural and industrial Lithuanians. I mean, the society in cities was quite different from those which were living in villages, which had a common connection with their partisans and were helping, assisting them, and those which were living in cities were in different conditions. So that's it for my speech, and we still have 10 minutes for finishing our plenary session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Simonas, for a nice presentation about Lithuanian history issues in the Soviet regime period. And at the same time, we had the possibility to give some questions for all presenters. So if you have any question to any of those presenters, please just raise your hand. I will come with the microphone. Still no questions.
May I?
Yes, please.
Thank you. I have a question for the first presenter, Yeva Ose, and my question sounds like this. What was the influence of a region, I mean, in your ironworks presentation about the ironworks, was there influence of German or Polish, or maybe it was a native factoring? I mean, yeah, thank you.
So this ironwork, it was made local, I think, because a lot of smithies are mentioned, and some of them are also archaeologically investigated. But of course, these farms, they came from Germany mostly, because Latvia, its region, this time in 17th century, it's very connected with Germany, and especially for some forms of these angle hinges and corner braces, there are such a baroque type, which is similar in German towns and also in Latvia. But of course, mostly they are functional production, and you can't say influence. Yes, it's such thing which was widely used, perhaps also in Lithuania and in Sweden and so on, but only very few research is made, and it's because I can't say so exactly, but I think mostly Germany. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe anybody else would like to ask? Still no.
I have also. Okay, I have a question for the Croatian delegation. Actually, for the presenter. If I correctly understood, the author you was talking about and about her works, she was writing on a historical material. I mean, on the situation in the 14th century and something like that. In my personal opinion, maybe it's a problem with my understanding because I'm a historian and sometimes I'm thinking how a person is able to write about 14th century. So the person actually should be at least semi-professional historian to understand the communication of a world, how people were communicating, what they were eating, how the travels was accommodated and something like that. Because the world was 600 years before she was living and something like that. So does she had some historical background?
We don't know that. The only fact that we can know for sure is that she had that history was part of her. Well, she was a graduate teacher. Okay, so she had courses in history. Even nowadays, you can't become a teacher of primary school education to teach in grades 1 to 8 without having courses in history. I'm not familiar with the syllabus of those days, okay? Neither in Bosnia nor in Austria. Well, as we said, part of the things are reflections probably of reality, but there are many things that are just imaginative, part of her imagination, okay? Yes, she was, what we also can say for sure is that she was really interested in history, and we can't call any of these two novels that we focused on as historical. Many things that I mentioned, we don't know whether they happened for sure, but those things that we mentioned with the conflicts and the tensions between Croatian Bosnian king, okay, you should know that there was a Croatian state there, okay. Stjepan Karamanlić was a Croat, okay, and even in those days, 600 years ago, this was the territory of tensions between Serbs, Croats, and Islam from the east, okay, but she was not interested in Islam. Primarily, she was interested in the tensions with the heretics, okay, on the Christian side, okay, which existed in France too in those days, okay, but they had the roots in theology too, okay, so even, well, and we should mention also Jews, even now, 25 years ago in the last war, okay, there was a Jewish minority in Sarajevo, okay, and a special branch with the roots from Spain, okay. And now here, all these alliances, as I mentioned, that really took place, okay, between Muslims and but things that are imaginative, that they poisoned water on something that I don't think that she was able to find proof of that, as you were able to find proof in CIA's document for partisan movement in your country. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Somebody else would like to add some questions? Maybe the last question for Simonas. You would like to ask?
Go ahead.
Yes, please.
If I may ask you, those estimations of CIA, how correct were they? from the things that we know nowadays. Okay, let's 1/3 of the population, as if I understood correctly, that's what they thought, that they would, let's say, be on the side of the West in case of any conflict, and those marriages, intermarriages, based on gender differences, male and female. Thank you.
Thank you. In my personal opinion, in this place, we're able to speak about probably two main groups, and in CIA, I mean, and the reports which I was working on, because they were declassified, the main information seemed for me that the authors of documents were those which were probably collecting the information toward the possibility of war. It seems for me that they were thinking of real possibility and collecting the data which fits for them. I can't say that we are able to speak about 100,000. It was never like that. But probably what's more important that the attitude of Soviet society toward the Soviet regime, actually it's well known that it was really anti-Sovietic. I mean, during the first years of occupation, when the memories of Lithuanian Republic were still fresh. And of course, the young generation, because in the reports, there was information that absolute majority of partisans are 24, 26 years old. So those which were born, let's say, in 1920s, and they get education in Lithuania or somewhere else. And of course, they were, it was really hatred for Russians and something like that. The intermarriages, it was really non-common issue. Even in the late Soviet time, it was, yeah, so I suppose the information was correct in this case.
So, as I understand, there are no more questions. I would like to thank everybody, especially for key speakers, for the great job, for nice presentations, and at the same time for giving us new knowledge about the research and the results. So thank you, everybody, for being the part of this plenary session. And of course, I'm very grateful for everybody in the room listening for those presentations. At the same time, as we know, it's 12 o'clock, so it's a time for your lunch. As Simonas told you already, it's your time in the city. It's so close to the main street and all small restaurants and cafes for you. I would like to emphasize one thing, that Šiauliai University is very interested in international cooperation. So we are very grateful for presenters of plenary session accepting this possibility to transmit our plenary session via Researchers Excellence Network online. And at the same time, you are all invited to become members of this international Researchers Excellence Network, which aims to consolidate our competence, knowledge, and at the same time sharing of our knowledge and the results and research. So if you have any interest in this membership, please contact Simonas or me directly. We will try to give you additional information about it. So wish you nice working session in the afternoon, and now have a nice lunch in the sun, City of the Sun. So thank you very much. Ačiū.